So I'm not sure how it happened, but in the book where we picked two dragon books, neither one of them really seems to feature, dragons. Welcome to Reading Crossbow. My name is Rob, and today I'm doing my midpoint review on Dragonfall by Laura Lam. This is a romantasy that was selected for us to read by Lana. Each month we each select a book for both of us to read. Whoever didn't select the book will do a midpoint review, and then we'll both be here for the final review of each book. So basically you get 5 episodes a month, and this is my shot at reading Lana's book this month. And this has actually been a really kind of cool book so far, and I've really been enjoying the first half. If you're reading along, I'm at about chapter 19. I think I finished 19 where I left off. And I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what reading this book is like. So I'm going to try to talk to you about this book. I'm not going to really try to give any spoilers, though some within the first half of the book will be discussed. However, since I haven't read the second half of the book yet, really can't spoil that half. So let's talk about the book itself. The book takes place in a fantasy world where there used to be humans and dragons together in one world. And at some point in the past, the dragons were cast out into a different plane of existence. And at the start of the story, basically, one dragon, the last male dragon, basically finds his way back to this world. And his goal is to basically try to bring back the rest of the dragons. And the human that he bonds with at the beginning of this book, they have their own goal that they're trying to achieve. They're trying to restore the life that they always should have had. But what I found as I read this book seems to remind me a lot of an ogre.
Ogres have layers. Onions have layers. You get it.
And so, to demonstrate this, I don't have any ogres, so we're going to have to go Shrek's idea and use an onion. So, how does this book have multiple layers? Well, for example, in the narration itself. For example, Arcadie's chapters they're told in the first person. So Arcadie uses the word I a lot throughout their chapters. Everin, on the other hand, the dragon, his chapters, while also technically in the first person, but because the way they're written as if he was writing something to Arcadie. They use the word you a lot. So it actually feels a lot like it's written in the second person, which I found to be very interesting. And then there's a third point of view character, a minor character that's happened so far, named Soren. Soren doesn't talk, like maybe there's some sort of like religious vow of silence. But Soren's chapters are told in the third person. And now this isn't because the characters, you don't know which character's talking right now, because each chapter is a single point of view character and it's titled, which includes the character's name. So you know exactly which character's talking, but the whole style of them is actually different between the different characters. Layers. Now, one of the things about these characters that definitely has multiple layers is their relationship with their own body. So, for example, Everin the dragon, while he does start the first chapter in dragon form, as soon as he arrives into the human world, his body changes shape into a humanoid type shape. He can actually modify his shape to become almost entirely human in appearance. But he doesn't have a choice in this matter. He's stuck in this human type form. A form he calls the preterite form. Now it's curious because the preterite form I initially interpreted as this was like a predator prey type of form. but if you look up the word that they use, it actually is a language term for a past form of something. So did the dragons used to be humanoid, and now they're traditional dragon, and now they have the ability to shift back into that original form, or is there something else going on? But because Everin is trapped in a form that he would actually not prefer, he does have this unusual relationship with his own body. Arcady also has a similar kind of unusual relationship with their body. You see, Arcady is a shape changer. The kind of magic that Arcady has allows them to change their form into, any other person that they choose. They actually have to touch another person to take on their form. But it's definitely interesting because there's so many of these shape-changing people in this society that they actually have developed a sign language for when you introduce yourself. You kind of make a gesture of some kind to identify whether or not you would prefer to use male pronouns or female pronouns. And in the case of Arcady prefers to use any pronoun. That's the sign they make. But the book generally consistently uses they, them as the pronouns for the character. But it's interesting because the whole culture has this kind of relationship with their own bodies. And I find the whole thing to be very interesting. Now, Arcady also has a personal discomfort with their own body, similar to Everin's trapped in dragon form, or trapped in human form, where Arcady has these scars on their body. And these scars are the results of a plague that they had received prior to the book. And these are just the side effects. But to the culture in general, seeing these scars actually would make a normal person very afraid of someone with the scars. And so Arcady goes through great lengths to actually hide these scars and never reveal them to others. And finally, Arcady's magic is actually cast through this, what they call the seal. And this is actually embedded onto Arcady's chest inside a little kind of container that's sunken into the flesh. So even using magic alters the person's body in a more kind of permanent way. So as you can see, each of these characters has these multiple layers of an unusual relationship with their own body. So the families of each of these two central characters are also very kind of layered in the way they've been built up. So Arcady, for example, their family in the past was basically declared like traitors of the society they live in. So Arcady, by relationship, has basically been cast out of this culture. And in fact, their kind of whole goal in life is just to kind of get back to where they should have been, had that not happened. But the family has left behind a plan, like a process in which Arcady should be able to recover at least a semblance of what should have been the life they would have had. Everin, on the other hand, also has a plan that's been predestined for them. In this case, it was actually a prophecy that said the last male dragon was going to return the other dragons to the world. So male dragons are also supposed to have a very strong prophetic divining type of ability, which Everin doesn't seem to really have. So far, Everin's been kind of a big disappointment to his family. Now, we do have that third character I mentioned earlier, Soren. Soren is an orphan who was raised in like a religious group home. At some point in the past, the high priest of this church actually has started grooming Soren to be their own personal like assassin and weapon to be used against enemies of the church. So all of these complex family relationships seem to there's a lot of synchronicity between them and just repetition and layers to this family story. So as I already mentioned, society in general views these characters with an odd relationship. In the case of Everin, there's this prophecy that he's going to save the species. In the case of Arcady, there's this kind of predestined plan that Arcady's family had left behind in order to help Arcady survive. But the culture itself absolutely just frowns upon Arcady and their whole family and the scars they have. So both of these cultures, for the two of them, are definitely looking down upon these individuals. And in the case of Soren being this like secret religious assassin, Soren is doing something that she's not supposed to be doing, and yet religiously feels like she needs to be doing it. And so they all have this very kind of layered, complex relationship with their own societies. There are other ways that these societies also kind of have a synchronicity or repetition between the layers of this story. For example, humans and dragons used to be in the world together, and they were split apart into separate worlds. The human nation used to be one big empire until it was also split apart, one half becoming a monarchy and the other half being a oligarchy with 3 counselors in rulership. There's also a great deal of economic split in this society, where there's the haves and the have-nots, and they could not really be further apart. And these things definitely do get replicated even within them, because, for example, the dragons are a functional monarchy, and there is a bit of tension there because it's a monarchy. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a romance. This kind of book you would expect Lana to have selected for us to read this month. And it's kind of curious because all 3 of these characters are all, virgins. And they are all very distant with their peers, trying to keep away from them. They actually have avoided romantic entanglement. So, for example, Arcady has those scars, so they can't show their body to anyone. That keeps a hard distance. Everin lives in a society where he has been mostly isolated even from the other dragons, and only really keeps a close contact with his family members. So, not a lot of romance there. But, for example, like the dragons, they actually don't need both sexes to be present in order to have children. The females just lay eggs, and they're born male or female mostly as a product of temperature. And since the world they live in is a lot warmer than the human world they're from, they've pretty much only been having female eggs for the most part. Now, what's interesting is now that Everin and Arcady are bonded magically, they actually still can't even touch each other, because if they touch, Arcady starts siphoning out Everin's magic, which is very painful and uncomfortable for Everin. So they can't even physically touch. So, if this is going to be a romantic story, they have to do it with purely through talking. And so far, that's what's happened throughout the story. It's been very interesting in that. In fact, since they're living in the same location, when they go to bed, they actually sleep with a locked door in between them. I mean, if that's not symbolism, I'm not sure what is. So let's get to actually kind of my favorite part of this story, is that it's a heist story. I love heist stories. They always have clever planning and interesting character interactions. And so this is actually a multi-layered heist. For example, Arcady has a plan in order to get back into their preferred place in society. And that's going to be one last big score. They'll get the money they need and be able to live the life they should have. Now, Everin also is planning a heist. Now, Everin's heist is quite a bit different, because Everin's heist is of Arcady, specifically Arcady's magic. So, since they are bonded and it's a partial bond, Everin actually has to gain the full and complete trust of Arcady. So this would help the bond become complete. And if it completes, then like if you hurt one, it won't also hurt the other. And that's important to the plan because Everin's plan, according to his family, is he's been ordered to gain the trust of Arcady and then kill them and steal their magic so that all the rest of the dragons can be summoned to this world. Now, it's really kind of interesting because these characters have to spend quite a bit of time working together to complete their own independent heists. And this includes like teaching Everin how to gamble and lockpick and palm, all of which are basically discussions of deception and distraction. And this applies to both characters as they're basically kind of working with each other and against each other at the same time. And in both cases, really the goal is one more big score and then that's it. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Soren. Soren's character kind of fills a role in a heist story. And what I mean by that is Soren is basically filling the role of the beat cop that's 2 steps behind the thieves in every single heist story that's ever been written. Whew, this is getting warm. Let's see how far along we are. Oh no. Okay, we're just going to have to be done with that page because I need to get to the end of this. I don't know how much more of this I could... This symbolism is for you. So, since I'm going to just skip those, let's just get it done. All right, so we're getting to the end here. You can probably tell from my eyes that we're almost done with the onion analogy. All right, so let's talk about the magic. The magic in this world basically kind of comes from the fact that humans and dragons have bonded to each other. They do this binding, and it's how the humans originally gained magic. Now, it's according to the dragons, at some point in the past, the humans betrayed the dragons, stole all their magic, and banished them from the world. So the dragons are just, they have a limited amount of magic in this other world, not even enough to come back. Now, since that happened, the humans have decided to start bonding themselves to something else. They bond themselves to these seals, like the one that I mentioned earlier that Arcady has sunken into their chest. And they use this as a focus to kind of channel their magic. Now, whenever a human casts magic, their seal kind of glows, and they can also use this seal to basically make like magical contracts. So it's all very similar in the way these things connect to one another. It's a form of binding 2 things together. And that even proceeds for the relationship between Arcady and Everin. That whenever Arcady touches Everin, it basically just pulls magic right out of Everin in a kind of hostile relationship. Whereas like Soren and Magnus, the religious people, they actually use forbidden magic to alter the minds of people, basically stripping away memories and, forcing them to say things that they might not otherwise want to say. And all of these are forms of essentially like an enchantment of the souls of all of these people. So, layers. There's also something going on that's kind of magic and kind of not, where there's a lot of spying that's happening. So the dragons actually use like scrying magic to spy in on the humans. And they've been doing this for centuries. And that's how they've been able to keep in touch with the humans. The religion of the humans actually has and Soren's a good example. It's almost like a little secret police of spies where they go out and they try to investigate people and figure out who the heretics are and those that are betraying humanity. And finally, even like Arcady is doing a lot of spying as part of the heist. Arcady has to like spy on marks and like learn their body language and their mannerisms and their speech patterns, because just copying someone's appearance really isn't enough to really steal their identity. So all of these are basically different layers of the same concepts. I don't know about you, but it sure feels like there's a lot of like repeated elements throughout this whole story, and I found that to be actually one of my most enjoyable elements of reading this book, is finding these connections. I mean, at some points it feels like the connections are like everywhere in this book.
Take a look at this.
I hope this is kind of giving you a good idea of what I've gotten out of this book. I really haven't tried to spoil the actual plot itself, and it's actually been a very enjoyable read for me. I'm glad Elena selected this book this month, especially after the last book, which I had picked. Be sure to like and subscribe so that YouTube will suggest next week's video when Lana will be here, and we'll discuss this book as a whole and really try to get down to whether or not, we would recommend this book for others. And as we discuss this, if you've been reading along, you can kind of join into that conversation. We have a Discord that you can, join the conversation there, as well as just the comments down below. We'd really appreciate you, doing all the normal YouTube things, because it really helps us with the algorithm. So until then, best wishes, and we will see you next week.